Hey kids, welcome to the Kapitol Life Podcast. I am your host, Abby Pagood. This is where we talk about all the things that life brings. The good, the bad, and of course, the healthy. Hey kids, welcome to the Kapitol Life Podcast. I am your host, Abby Pagood. This is where we talk about all the things that life brings. The good, the bad, and of course, the healthy. And today we have a very fascinating episode of Keeping It Real with Real People. As I have brought on the wonderful, the marvelous Andrea Leigh for our episode of The Becoming. Welcome to the Kapitol Life, Andrea.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. And you'll have to forgive my voice. I had a little laryngitis, which is why you and I delayed for a week and a half.
Well, and I love that you delayed. And then I woke up a little bit with it yesterday. And then I was like, my audience knows what I sound like. If anything, that'll give them some razzmatazz with the entertainment.
Well, you give them the razzmatazz and I'll give them the raspy.
Too funny. Before we dive in, I want to pique your interest in becoming a Kapitol Health founder. But Abby, what is a Kapitol Health founder? Well, I'm so glad you asked. The Kapitol Health founder is just a fancy way of getting you mega discount options for the Kapitol Health app. Plus, you get a free Kapitol Founders t-shirt and access to the focus program Stretch It Out. I know all of you have been anxiously anticipating the launch of the Kapitol Health app, and it is coming. My developers are working their fingers to the bone, coding everything from scratch. This app is something entirely new and has never been done before. Think of it like a trainer and nutritionist in your pocket, evaluating you where you are at and progressing with you as you evolve. Being a Kapitol Health founder will get you 3 months free off a 1-year subscription or 6 months free off a 2-year subscription. So hop over to KapitolHealth.com, that's KAPITOL health.com, and take advantage of these exclusive deals. These deals will be gonzo when the app launches. So go and check it out. This episode of The Kapitol Life is brought to you by Zen Holistic Wellness Center, where modern tools meet ancient wisdom to help you reclaim your health and rediscover balance. Nestled in the heart of Allen, Texas, Zen offers multidisciplinary approach to empowering you to take the lead in your health journey. Whether you're navigating fatigue, weight changes, migraines, menopause, allergies, GI issues, or chronic pain, Zen's expert team is here to guide you. They will help you restore balance, enhance your well-being, and feel healthier, happier, and more at peace. Visit Zen Holistic Wellness Center today, and let's get back to the basics of being human together. Please like, share, and rate us on whatever platform you're listening. It's how we start to really spread the message of good in the world that needs it so much right now. Well, it's interesting because we met about, I want to say it was like about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago. And unbeknownst to me, we just got along just perfectly fine and thick as thieves and had so much in common and chatty. And then ended up setting up like kind of a little more meeting, a virtual coffee so that we could get to know each other a little bit more. And what I found absolutely fascinating was that there was a couple things that you said when we were chatting, and unbeknownst to me, I was completely unaware of some of your journey processes to which you've been facing over the last couple years, if not longer, I would say, because that process is a little bit different. So before we jump into that, I just want to make sure the listeners and our audience is we are talking about some major issues and topics that are going on in our society right now that a lot of people don't understand, and it's causing a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of uneasy emotions around it. There's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of extremism to almost the maximum, to the point of where people are starting to forget how to just even have human decency. And so I want to warn everybody that if you're uncomfortable with some of these kind of conversational points, then it's time for you to go. I love you guys. Come back to the next episode. But like, we need to be mindfully aware, which most of our guests and most of our listeners are freaking fabulous, and they're always about evolution of self and getting to the next place. But we are definitely going to be talking about, transitioning today. And if you know the word transitioning in the public of society, I shouldn't have to say more than that. So, um, so I would just love to say, Andrea, like you know, gorgeous outfit, gorgeous makeup, all the things. You contour better than I do. And I was unbeknownst to me that you were even in a transitional state in your life and living your best self.
I paid a lot of money for that.
But at least you're honest about it.
Yes, I
So,
paid a lot of money for that. And in fact, I think I, um, I do. It's one of those things where people say, "Do you identify as a woman?" And I said, "I think it's more important for me to be identified as a woman, not identify as a woman."
right.
So, which is actually, I think, is really, if a lot of people would think about that, there might be a little less angst in the culture right now. But I think you're exactly right. There is some extreme viewpoints going on. But you know what? I feel really comfortable with. Really feel comfortable with where the culture is generally regarding this subject matter. I have a lot of experience in it, in different industries that I've had careers in, and where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I walk around with thinking all the time is that how much I abhor politics, because I think so many of the extremes that you had mentioned before are fostered up and ginned up by the extreme right and the extreme left
Yeah.
to really mobilize their base in political years. And they mobilize their base with fear, and it's just shameful. And I
Yeah.
think the culture in general really, I really do think the culture in general is wants the best for everyone, including me. And I'm very comfortable with that. I do know
You
that
know,
people deeply care on each side, and I gather that. But in general, people want the best for each other because they want the best for themselves as
well,
well.
and that's what humanity usually is,
Yes.
right? It's like we have maybe 20 to 30% of the population that are like more, not participatory, or they're selfish and greedy, or like they're on their own prerogative or control tactics and all these other different things. But majority of the population, they're decent-hearted people. They want good in the world. They believe in things that are outside of themselves, and they really want to reap, like, not just reap the benefit of giving to others, but also, having other people care about them as well in return. And some people do it in a selfless nature. And so I think you really put the nail on the head right there, because it's so much of this extremism that's really causing a blockage in the conversations that we're able to have, especially in public, because everybody thinks it's about them, and it has nothing to do with it. It's like when I look at the whole subject, there are definitely things that I don't understand. Well, I don't live inside other people's bodies. I can't begin to comprehend what it means to live a life, life experience that someone else has had. I know what my experience is, and I know what my perceptions are. But at the same time, I feel like it is careless and naive to claim to know right more than somebody else for themselves. That is up to the individual. That's to their own authenticity. That's about their self journey, their discovery of self. And so we have all of these different dynamics that come into play.
Oh, so many.
Really, when we feel like, a lot of times people have that reactive point because they feel like their rights are being infringed upon, or something, or a concept is being forced. Well, when someone meets it with aggression and someone meets it with force, how the hell can you expect people to change? Because if anything, they're going to regress, they're going to fight against it, and then they're going to it almost creates a monster that can never come to an understanding. And it's like we need to be able to say, hey, let's have an open discussion. Let's see how it is for other people, what they're perceiving, what they're thinking. Let's mindfully go through these conversations so that, we can actually have like a broader perspective of what's happening, because your life journey has nothing to do with mine whatsoever. I mean, the only part that we have is we get to match each other here at this moment. We get to have these crucial conversations. And at the same time, who's needing to hear this podcast is going to hear what they need to hear in it. And that's the blessing of society and humanism in it all.
Yeah, I agree.
So I do have a question, because this has been more of a newer transition for you. So there's a lot of things going on in society right now where the age is a bigger concern of when hormones are being introduced to children, or having children going through some of their self-discovery or, lack thereof. It's
Sure.
there's
Every child does it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's sometimes where it's like the situation could be, avoidance because they're not getting fulfilled in some other way of their life. Some of it is they were born into their body, they were awake and aware of things right off the gate, and they're just trying to mindfully go through that. Yours was a little bit later in life. What age did you decide to start taking the approach or taking the steps to start transitioning?
Roughly after I had been I've been married for over 21 years, almost 22 years. My marriage was in a good spot. My my ranch was paid off. My oldest daughter had gotten married. My youngest daughter at the time was about 15 or 16. I'd have to do the math in my head. My career was at a high point. I was not going, didn't feel threatened at all if I were to pursue this route, and so I did. I was in my early 50s, and so I don't like to date myself, but
You don't have to. You
so,
don't have
but
to.
it's been great. So yeah, I'm definitely an older woman that transitioned at a little bit later age.
Okay.
Um, and like you said, there's a wide range, and we can talk about those. We can talk about those.
Has it been something that's been in the back of your mind for years to come, or did it kind of spring up onto you as like a awakening
Well,
self-discovery point?
Well, I think the really interesting thing is it's as you know, as I look backwards, especially when my wife and I would sit on the porch as the transition was. Uh, there's a Let me back up. I'm one, in my personal opinion, and so this is for Andrea, is that my transition period lasted just a few months. Okay. And so I believe a lot of the arguments we face are arguments that have to do with these awkward periods of pre-transition and transition. And then when someone has transitioned, typically fully, and I don't mean by surgically wise, but I just mean once that they feel like, oh, I've arrived at where I wanted to be, then a lot of that goes away. There's a lot of, I'll give you the numbers later on as we discuss, but with me, I had all those things that I said had happened. Those all clicked away, and that's where it started to surface. Now, as I look backwards, like I said, as I would sit on the porch with my wife at the ranch, and we were contemplating and talking about what was coming. It was really interesting because we would talk about, oh my gosh, I would remember being enamored with the fashion and while I was in college, or she would say, now I completely understand why you filled my closet with clothes I wouldn't wear, because you were buying your style of clothes. So we can look back and see some of those little things that must have been in the recesses of my mind. But it was only when these other things that I ticked off already fell away that it kind of like as in scales from my eyes kind of fell away, allowed me to just do a lot of personal introspection and things like that. And when the thoughts were happening, and when the changes were when my thought process was changing on some of the things that I began contemplating. I didn't know exactly where it was leading. I did. I just knew that it was looking back, it was just a process. It wasn't like I woke
Hmm.
up one day and said, "Damn, I'm going to be a girl."
Right.
And it was more of, hey, I'm kind of thinking about this in our relationship. I'm thinking about the dynamics here and the dynamics there and things like that would take a place in thought processes first. And so
Okay.
it was a few years after that when it was when I decided when I realized what I needed to do. And so that
How
was the
how
process.
did your wife at the time deal with the realization? Because, as you're approaching, that third phase in life of getting closer to retirement, and, you know, children are getting married, and, completing school and getting married, it's like here a husband and wife get together and they're envisioning their life, grandchildren, travel, those types of things. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, ruh like, just kidding, that's not what my future is going to have. Like, how was that? How did she go through that, and how did you go through that with her?
It's a grieving process. It's a grieving process it was a grieving process for her of the loss of, like you said,
Mhm.
you've got a future you envision. And so there's a loss of that one has to grieve. There's the loss of a masculine Harley Davidson riding, ranching, gun carrying husband that you lose, bodybuilder, and not only that, but it's being replaced by a blonde haired, blue eyed girl that could have haunted her in high school from another clique. So you have to deal with that. Okay, um, but we had such wonderful communication and we know each other so well. She could see it coming before I did. And
Yeah.
but
It
it
sounds like you
doesn't
married like your best friend without.
we are best friends. We are best friends, but we're not just friends. We're
Yeah.
husband and wife and wife now. We know each other very well. Um, we say to each other all the time, we're very comfortable that no one loves us like we love each other. So we're very
Mhm.
comfortable in that. And it's a really nice place to live. And she did not leave me, and I didn't think she would. Um, there you have it.
Yeah.
So,
And how are the girls? How are your two
um,
girls?
well, they're my girls. The oldest one didn't take too well to it, and the second one, being younger, there's a 13-year difference in the two. The second one
Mhm.
being younger and still in her teens right now, but she's heartily independent, a published author already at 19, and
Impressive.
she's an impressive kid. And her question was, why now? And when it
Which is a
was,
great question.
yeah, it
That's a
was a great question. She was like, that was my only question, is why now? And and so it was like, well, it's just kind of when it came up, it wasn't even entertained. It wouldn't be something someone entertained years ago, or when they were even remotely when I was your age, it wouldn't have even been thought of, but it wasn't in
right.
my mind anyway. So that was the question from her. Um, and so the immediate family was great. As far as my
Well,
parents,
and it sounds like, you really created a home where you guys could have open conversations about how you feel, like open and honest conversations. Like, it wasn't like you were holding on to something
no,
for 10 to 15 years, and then it was like all of a sudden you laid this bomb and you're like, this is how I always felt. Where in some
no,
situations that can be how someone is, because you know, they may not know how to go through those conversations, or they may not have, some of they might be uncomfortable even verbalizing it themselves,
yeah.
to say that.
Yeah, I had my stuff worked out well, in as I progressed through the transition, and I had very open communication with everybody. There was not a what's a good word for it? There was not the same line of communication for everybody. My parents were talked to the way I needed to talk to my parents because of the relationship we have. And I talked to each of the girls like they needed to be talked to based on the relationship. It's not like I used a script or anything like that.
Right.
I called some close family members, like some cousins and some aunts and uncles that we were close to. And then I addressed it with my colleagues at work, and I can talk about that in a few minutes. But there was a way I wanted to do it. I'm a very own it upfront personality. I take things head on, and I did it with the family, and I wanted to get it out of the way because I didn't want to live in transition. I wanted to transition, not live in it.
Right. Now, how did what was the reaction from your parents, being that they're from a different generation and there's probably a little less leeway of understanding, like every parent's a little bit different on how they process some of the things that are happening to their kids, whether it's regardless of, it took away from the image to which they thought their child would be, or, it's also the grieving of, oh, they're no longer this. Wait a second, what happened to this child? Okay, wait a second. Now I have to reframe. And, it's like, even though the memories are there and the life experiences are there, there's still that filtering process of as we evolve and become more of who we are today.
Yeah, I don't think that there was with my parents. It was a quick process. There was a lot of what you just said. There was some grieving, but they processed it in a way they needed to, as far as understanding. I am very clear with people that I cannot help them understand. I barely understand it myself. So I don't expect understanding. I expect kindness and a normal behavior to me, and that's what I've gotten. Now, I've had experiences where I've had close friends grieve the loss of their close friend, and didn't want a relationship with me after that. And and while that's painful, that's okay. And I've had other ones that I've had other friends, you couldn't tell a difference as long as I helped them make money. And I'm just kidding about that. But it's kind of like you can tell so many people are just really non-surface. They're more into who you really are, and I am too. It's like who I am in here, not
right. Soul bonding, and soul friendships, right? If you find this helpful or insightful, don't forget to connect with us on Facebook and YouTube at Kapitol Health. That's Kapitol Health. Also, visit us at kapitolhealth.com and subscribe to our newsletter and get wicked awesome updates. Like, you really pointed out some really good things of, it's not any different for any one of us to have a friendship where it served its purpose in our time of life when we needed that friendship. And there are times where those friendships continue on for many years to come.
Yes.
And there are times where they break, and it's not that the friendship's broken. It's just that it's no longer a match. It's no longer an alignment. Each person's going into their direction to where they're supposed to in their life journey. And it's more just honoring what the friendship was and saying, okay, that served the purpose of what I needed when I had it. And now it's time for me to grow and move forward from that. And that in itself is that has nothing to do with transitions. That has to do with just being a human.
Yeah, that's right. And I look at our lives as journeys, and we experience the journey alone. Some people are on the path with us for a mighty long time, but we begin the journey and we end the journey by ourselves. I will comment. I want to go back to what my parents My parents'
Yes, please
reaction,
do.
my parents' reaction was one of shock. But within that afternoon that I spoke to them, within that conversation, while they still had a couple of months to process what had happened and to grieve, within that conversation, I knew that my transition would be quick and it would be fine. And
Hmm.
my parents and I now have a closer relationship now than we have ever had.
That's
And
amazing.
and it is amazing because
Yeah.
they see they can see wow, my mom's a poet and she wrote some really good poetry to help her get through it, but they can see that wow, she really did this is really was a good move for her.
Yeah.
And so it's really neat to see how my parents reacted and to the transition. And it was in that, like I said, I'm going to repeat myself, but it was in
Yeah.
that afternoon that I knew it would all be good, and my
That's
transition
amazing.
it would be short, and it was.
Where was the relationship like prior? Did you always have a good relationship with your parents? I mean,
Always. My
yeah.
parents have been I think that that's one reason that I am the way I am, why you see me on stages now as confident, why I'm very open, why I'm confident in what I believe. I don't impose my beliefs on anybody, but I'm confident because I grew up with the wind in my sails, and that wind was put there by my parents that said I could do anything I wanted to do, and they didn't impose their desires on me. They just, and this is from the youngest age, whether I was in sports or whatever it was, my career path that I chose, they just were very supportive of me, and they thought that whatever I was doing was great because it was me doing it. And
That's
I think that
amazing.
I think it's a really cool way to be with your kids that, and I don't mean in a helicopter, unhealthy kind of way, but I mean that you love your kids so much that whatever they're involved in is great because it's their stuff. And my
Right.
parents have been supportive of me and my stuff because it's me and my stuff.
Right. And well, and that's the thing, and my husband and I regularly talk about. It's about, you know, there's, your way of parenting to where it comes up, and our parenting style changes with each child because each child's
Yes.
completely different and completely unique in their own way. And so it's about being the parent that we need to be to help guide them to be their greatest light and being able to shine their light the way that they need to. And there'll be times sometimes where my youngest will have a little bit of a different approach, or he'll be a little bit more theatrical, or he'll be a little
Yeah.
bit more whatever. And I will hesitate and reevaluate sometimes how I approach some of those discussions, because I identify that I may not fully understand what that skill is for yet, but I see that that's part of who he is. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to shame him or have him feel resistance in being able to share who he is, because I don't want him to hinder who he is, because I may be not as comfortable with his approach on something.
Yeah.
And so I have to be very mindful about, where my kids are, how they interpret, how they perceive things, so that we can also have those open discussions, especially when it comes to, masculine and feminine energy, the universe, living by higher self. The more that we have these open communications with our kids, those, and how we raise them and allowing them to shine and find their legs to stand underneath them, they get more confidence, they get more building blocks to help them get where they're supposed to
Yeah.
be, and not having as much struggle or delay later on in life, like a lot of people don't find themselves till much later, or they've already made it 40, 50 years, and then they turn back and go, oh, wait a second, I was hoping to do something else. So that always ends up being something that we always very much focus on and consider. Now, when it comes to, I love the fact that you said how you don't infringe on other people's, rights and things of that nature. Now, when that comes to it, that I think is a really big topic to discuss. And that's more of a physical discussion that I really want to address, because, it's like, you know, feminists are a little bit quieter right now because they don't necessarily know how to navigate, rights for people, but at the same time, like, I was born as a female and we've been striving for these rights for so many years. And then there's a lot of, with sports right now, award system, there's so much confrontation. What are some of your opinions about how our society is approaching things? Because I feel like the way that they're approaching it is batshit crazy and causing more problems than anything.
It's Yeah, it is batshit crazy and causing problems because it's not because it's driven for political purposes. So
Yeah.
and when things are that way, there's not a lot of critical thought given to it. And
Right. It's
so
aggression and control tactics at its
yeah,
finest.
and so it's so much of the stuff is driven by to mobilize the extreme bases of the left and the right,
Mm-hmm.
and so there is not a lot of critical thought because they use a lot of straw man arguments that are a lot of fear based, and then they use one off fear based examples that simply just beg credulity.
Hmm. No, I see, and I'm very much a strong believer of, but I'm a very strong believer of, like, I'm affirmed within my body. I know who I am. I don't have any problem if some, however anybody wants to identify as, that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with their journey. I will admit that I teeter on the fence when it comes to, female sports going up against male born. And I'm saying male born because regardless of identification, there's a big distinct difference between lung capacity, muscle mass, strength, all those different things. Now, there's some topic about, where we have our hormone blocking agents, and then you also have the hormones that get prescribed to counteract what is happening in that transitional period. And
Yeah.
so what the thing that concerns me a lot is, usually it doesn't matter when you start the blockers, that's when it's blocking out. So if you had a child that started blockers at 14, they're still physically capable of a male up to that certain point. Like, they have gotten to that strength. So you can't put that 14-year-old, 14-year-old born male transition to female, even though blockers and then female hormones are being introduced, they're still going to be much stronger than a female born 14-year-old, because that's when their blockers got introduced. Now, my concern is more on the developmental stage of brain hormones, all of these different things that we don't really have a lot of the studies for a long-term basis. And that's the part where it's like, okay, here we have someone developing as, I don't have an issue if someone needs to identify as somebody else, but to put in some of the blockages in brain development, hormone development, all those types of things at a certain age group, that's where I get very concerned, because there's that argument of, if the individual isn't allowed to vote or even to choose, a lot of their stuff until they're 18 or even 21, how can we be making decisions for them in that early age when sometimes they're not even discovering who they are until later years? There's a lot of those conversations that hit that.
Well, that's all very well said.
I'm glad you said that, because it felt like I was like, blah, 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 blah. I felt like a little bumbling because I was trying to
No,
piece it
I think it's all
together,
very
but they
well.
get the
I think it's all
accuracies.
No, I think it's all very well said, and I think that what a question I would like to put out there uh, is where's the sportsmanship in sports?
Okay.
And that goes right to what you said. How much joy can there be? How much joy can there be in winning races and competition against people when there's a question of inherent ability advantages in someone's ability. And when we question those kind of things, you raised earlier in the conversation the question of brain development and hormone development, all that kind of stuff. All those can be, we can discuss each one of them, but there's many, many things that we, as a culture, have decided that the youth don't have the life experience to make the call for themselves. And in my opinion, if we're going to simply base some things off of how someone wants to, if someone wants to start taking pharmaceutical therapy or whatever it is based on how they're feeling, then especially with adolescents and things like that anymore, that might lead down a path. Now, as far as I just think it's one of those things that in all honesty, I just don't think it comes real close to, you just can't have your cake and eat it too. It's just that I have no issue at all with letting kids be as authentic as they feel like being at any point in time. All you have to do is go to the mall and look at the kids and the young adults and older adults living their lives, and it's people watching how much better does it get to people watch than to go to the mall and go to the airport and people say it all the time. I don't think that, though you gave a lot of good examples as to, what we think is good for the youth to decide on their own, and what we don't let them decide on their own based on life experiences, whether it's alcohol usage or riding without a motorcycle
kids
helmet.
are going to test the waters regardless, like if they're going to test the waters, they're going to take the initiative. And when you said, for me, it's about like confidence building, it's like, it's no different than when you have a 4 or 5-year-old that wants to wear a Halloween costume for 3 or 4 weeks in a row. Uh-huh. And you're like, okay, buddy, we got to take this off. We got to wash it, clean it, whatever. But then like, sure, no problem. That experience teaches them some of that dynamic of they feel confident in their costume. It makes them happy. But then at the same time, they went out to the public and then they saw 3 or 4 of their friends. And when they saw 3 or 4 of their friends, like they might've made a comment about that they wore it all week, and then that might make them subconscious, but that's something that they have to kind of face and navigate through. One of the things I loved about you when we met and we were having these important conversations just in general, because we could have these conversations regardless. What I loved is how you even approached that you were fortunate to be the size that you were, uh-huh, as a male. And so that when you transitioned, you didn't stand out as much, like someone that might be 6'4", and there's an easement. Like I barely even knew. I would never have questioned. I had no idea. It wasn't even in my thinking. Right.
And I think and so I've been that was on purpose. One of the things that helped me decide to go ahead and transition is, and I think this is important for me, it was one of the most important things for me, and that is simply that it wasn't that I needed to identify as a woman. I needed to be identified as a woman. And I wanted to be a woman for me to experience being a woman. I needed to be in alignment on the outside and the inside. And when I knew I could do that, that's where I decided to go ahead and make my transition short, not only for myself, but for everybody else, including personal relationships, familial relationships, and career relationships. But I did not expect people to fall in line for me because I wanted to identify as. I wanted to make it easy on me and everybody else because I was identified as. Does that make sense?
Yes. And what I really like is that you were being mindful, not only what your needs were, but also being mindful and honoring the space that people needed in their transition of understanding what was happening with your
They did.
story.
I
And
did.
that makes a big difference, because a lot of times, especially with the younger generation, there's so much force and aggression of like, accept me, accept me, accept me. And the fact is, like, I know people out there that don't accept me or don't fully, I mean, I even have people in my own family that don't fully understand who I am or what I am, and that's
Mhm.
perfectly fine. But at the same time, it's like, that's not what this is about. Like, you had to do what you needed to do to make sure that you were in alignment with yourself. But it's when I say control tactics, I'm not meaning society trying to control an individual and prevent them from doing things. I'm talking control tactics on all aspects. That means the individual that's transitioning, that is trying to infringe on someone else's processing, dealing with it, like,
It's
it's not your business.
No,
Like
I've called it. Yeah, it's what I think where what you're trying to get to is what I'm starting to, which I call it compelled validation.
okay.
And so it's that it's to me, first of all, I just do not like the compelling of speech. It shows me if someone, um, I hope the lighting is good and the camera's good in here because, I do pretty good out in the, I do pretty good out in the real world. And so I don't feel like I compel anybody to validate my appearance, but that doesn't mean that extremely perceptive people don't peg me right away and then have a different thought process or refer to me in a different way than what I would prefer. It just tells me more about them. Um,
Yes.
is it tells me more about that person. They have compelled speech laws in Canada now, to where if you don't refer to somebody as their preferred pronoun, then the law is broken, and that's even when they're not around. Well,
But do you find that slightly extreme? Because in like,
of course,
so
it's not slightly extreme. It's big extreme. It's
like
not slight. It's big, and
yeah, I just,
it's none of my business what people think about me when they're not around me, or even if they are around me. It's not their business of what they think about. It's not my business what they think
yeah, I
about me.
can't apologize for how someone perceives me. Like,
No.
if I'm quick and in a rush from one appointment to the next, as you know how I am, and I'm very direct and straight to the point, and then I'm like, oh, gotta go, and then I like do my thing. It's just part of my nature. Some
Yeah.
people might in their moment think that I'm being rude, or that, or like, or just oblivious or something. Well, that's their perception. But
Yeah.
that's not what reality is.
No,
But I
reality
can't
is
apologize for their perception of me. That's not my responsibility.
yeah, I think the reality is that most people are kind, and there are some people that like to poke for the purpose of poking, and that's just reality, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just how we are. But most of the time, I'm comfortable with the fact that most people in our culture are very self-absorbed, and they're really not thinking about Andrea.
Yeah.
After I leave their presence, or after they leave mine, they're really not thinking about me because they've
Well, and
got
it's
their
not
own
their
lives.
job to, because it's your
Yeah,
life.
yeah. But I mean, I'm just not. I'm just not. I don't sit around and think of the interactions that the interactions, the daily interactions I have with people after I have them and after I leave their presence, of acquaintances and people that I might meet in a styling. Uh,
Hmm.
I'm a I'm a part-time stylist, and so in a styling situation, I just don't kind of. And first of all, those aren't the places that they happen because we usually have very good relationships there. But um,
Well, and I
anyway,
find that really fascinating too, because even like in fashion
yeah,
trends and all that stuff, it's like it's predominant. I mean, everybody needs their good gay best friend to help them with, matching something, or, it's like there's all these different, there's more free flowing in fashion world and artistic world, where people are allowed to express themselves with less judgment, in my opinion. I don't know if that's like an outsider's perspective, because I don't live in that world the way that you do, but I've noticed that style is an expression of self. Like your identity is an expression of self. Like tattoo selection is expression of self. Like that is kind of, what you choose to be for Halloween is an expression of self. Like, you have the right to be able to express who you are. And if people like it or people don't,
Yeah, usually,
okay.
and my role in fashion has been as a leader of different boutiques and different staffs working for me, and so, but it's not in my. I've had a lot of diversity, so I can refer to that, and I love that subject matter, but my I usually am not. My experience has not been that I'm accepted because everybody is flamboyant or it's common in the fashion industry. My acceptance is just because I'm another girl that works in the fashion industry and no one thinks anything else.
Right.
So that's been my experience.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. There's not. I don't have any. I don't think my experience has not been unique in fashion. My, for any reason other than the background I had before, which was a successful pharmaceutical career and running ranching on the side and having been in triathlon, and then decided to just pursue a completely different industry because I was good at it and had a passion for fashion, and was put into a leadership position in a couple of places in Dallas and Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So that's
Well, and that's
that's
after
what makes me
having years
unique
of
in fashion.
experience in pharmaceutical, which your pharmaceutical experience is even with Pfizer, which we don't have to go into right now. That could be another podcast.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
that it's important for people to understand that you've been through a very large, I guess, connection of a lot of what's happening on the forefront of our society right now, especially when it comes to
yeah.
shifting and change.
It is a lot. I've had a lot of personal transition besides gender.
Hmm.
And I have a lot of thought on that. Also, being a health and science specialist for 35 years, I tend to not wade into a biology and gender differentiation and stuff. I just, there's no reason for me to engage in something like that, which is intellectually it just challenges credulity not to when people start pushing biology and conflating it with gender or
Well,
gender.
and
I'm going
I'm
to say,
really glad you're
I'm going to
bringing
say gender identity,
gender
because
identity. Yeah,
gender.
and so when we have to be specific on that because we definitely want to make sure people know where we're going. And I
Gender and
love that
there's
if only you could see my notes for the episode, you just segued into the next
Yeah,
perfectly.
there's a
So
big
thank you for
difference.
that,
Yeah,
co-host.
yeah. Go ahead. I'm
So
ready to go there.
yeah, no, you perfectly brought that in just the perfect way because, you're talking about physical body and science. And now this is where I really want to talk about the energetics because so much of our youth right now, like if you really think about kind of like how our parents and how things were when our parents were raised, and it's like, you did this, you didn't do that. You did this because this is the way it's done. And there was, and if you had emotions, it was like, shush, 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 this is not the place and time. There's a lot of those different misunderstandings or, people behaving as behaving a particular way because it's expected of them, although it suppressed their voice or suppressed their heart or, or it prevented them from shining their light. Okay. Now, what I find really interesting is that as society is evolving, we are having a lot of the environmental factors, but we're also having more and more kids that are intuitively inclined in a very spiritually natural way, which is how our body is. We're energetic bodies, we're energetic beings. We have our spidey sense that helps us go through knowing when we're in alignment with self, when we're not, right? The difference is that previous generations weren't as readily awake and aware of those intuitive gifts. They didn't really have logic or not logic, but like they didn't have the verbiage, or they didn't know how the terminology was fully developed, or it was, but then someone might overhear it and think that, oh God, they're hippity dippity, or they're a hokey weirdo, or, they would get put into that category. And what I find really interesting, and I think that when you go into the philosophy of, there are a lot more there are so many more people that are becoming awake and aware and in tuned with their bodies and what their soul is trying to speak to them, that is why we're seeing a lot of this, identity, getting to purest self, living their authenticity, really their discovery, they're going through their self-discovery to find their purpose. I mean, if we're here on Earth School and the name of the game is to wake up to our purpose, like part of it's waking up to our reality and building that life. And in regard to that, I think this also deals with how our relationship with masculine and feminine energy.
So let me comment on that, because there's a lot to unpack there. So what you described is a lot of it's the masculine and feminine. I grew up with that, which is very interesting. So that may have been a lot of, and I don't mean I personally grew up with the masculine and feminine battle. I don't mean that. I grew up with a mother that was a counselor and had books all over the shelf on Jungian psychology. Well, therein lies the individuation process, which is becoming fully formed to your full self at the higher level, spiritual level, and at the physical level. And so a lot of that encompasses the masculine and feminine qualities that we all have. And we all go through that process, and hopefully we become whole. I don't think most people do, because I don't think most people are open to it, but I think more and more are every day at every level, because I think we're actually becoming more spiritually aware. So I think the young people are in a spot to where it's actually easier for them in today's culture to individuate. And that means that it's okay for them to be a little bit more unique in their presentation style. So it makes them easier for us to publicly see their they're dealing with their masculine and feminine as they get older and go through adolescence and all that. Gender plays a part of that, because it's an outward and I'm gonna back up and say some gender identity plays a part in that, because it allows some outward physical expression of that process that they may be going to. And so,
well, we're in physical form, so we're in and when I look at this, it's like masculine and feminine energy, those aren't things that you touch like that. That's just correct. It's a way, it's a B, right? Like it's yin and yang, right? You have, all of us have masculine energy, all of us has feminine energy. A lot of us struggle with damaged masculine energy or damaged feminine energy, and then we also have our safe feminine energy and our safe masculine energy. So there's a lot of dynamics of, when I wake up, there could be a day where I feel more in control. I'm getting my things done. I'm on top of it. I'm totally channeling in my masculine energy. But then when I go into, I've completed, I surrender, I let my creative flow. I have, like, dealing with the chaoticness and creative nurturing aspect is that when I step into my feminine, we all have that. And so I think sometimes there can be, confusion around the conversation, because we're such in a physical body that we always have to have titles for things, like that's a table, this is a chest,
and labels.
Here's my microphone. And that's part of where the disconnect comes for me, is because I don't really look at it as, here I need to be identified as XYZ, because I'm still buying into the system that we have to have titles. My name is Abby, but I'm not connected to that name, because I know who my soul self is. If you and I were on an energetic plane and we cross each other soul to soul, we identify each other not by our name, but by our energy and the vibration to which we present. And so I think that sometimes when we're in physical form, that's where shit gets interesting, because we really are trying to navigate, especially our younger youth. coming into their body, they're with much more radar and expansion and understanding. But then at the same time, they're in a physical body, and then they're trying to figure out, wait a second, hold on, where am I? Where am I going? And then sometimes they may not have the guide to be able to talk through the energetics to understand. And I bring up a friend of mine, she was born female. She is still identifies as female, but she remembers her past life experiences. She knows that she has numerous past life experiences where she was a female in them, and there were other times that she's had male past life experiences. But here she is born into this life experience, and she's like, oh, okay, I have memory of my past as a male. I have memory as my past as a female, but here I am in this physical body. Okay, oh, this is what I got. Okay, this is what I'm working with. But she does not identify herself as a they, like in her head and having thoughts and emotions and things. Yeah, absolutely. That would be a they, them, because it's all of the past lives and the past personalities and the, discovery of self. There's a lot going on there, but there's so much in our physical world experience that we for some reason get obsessed on having titles. And I feel like titles is actually getting us away from where we're supposed to be going. Like, it's almost like it becomes the petty argumentation to keep us stuck in that lower vibrational sequence and preventing people from getting where they're supposed to be. Like, why do we have to keep having a title of the proper pronoun or whatever? Like, I see you for who you are. I'm not thinking his, her, whatever. I'm just thinking Andrea. Yeah. But I'm only thinking Andrea because that's what I have to call you in physical form. Where in a soul life, I know who you are. I get who you are, and I can understand you. Why do we have to put a title on it?
Yeah, and I think, and so I think what you're talking about, and the frustration there is so much discussion that's meant to it's meant to keep the stuff going. It's meant to keep it's pronoun usage and all that is a form of compelled validation on one hand. Let's put the onus on everybody else to call that person what they prefer to be called. Let's put when that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The person can. There is some responsibility that the person who wants to be called the pronoun they want to be called, make it easy on those people around them to call them that. That's why I said that it wasn't so important for me as what I wanted to do identify as it was to be identified as. Just catch the subtle difference. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be identified as a woman, or else what good was how I have no idea what a woman that popped out of mama and mama was said, you got a girl. I don't know her experience. I know the experience of being a woman from my perspective. And so it, for me and the perspective I needed it to be what I needed it to be for myself. It didn't matter. It wasn't going to matter if, I suppose I could have not changed a thing and just said, I'm going to call myself a woman now. Everyone else is going to fall in line. Well, what good of that? What would that have been good for?
Right. Well, and I bring that up as to me, it's the same thing of like when we're facing things like racism. My husband and my husband's Hawaiian Samoan and Marshallese, so we're the interracial marriages that, we're a melting potted society. What the hell do you expect, right? My grandfather in the 1940s wrote a paper for college, and the professor asked, how do you eliminate racism? And he responded, interracial marriages will take care of that. And that was his answer in the 40s, right?
Hey, I'm going to stop you real quick. Do you remember 5, 6, 7 years ago, might have been longer, do you remember the girl that said, I'm identifying as Black now?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And the media the media just roasted her. And they even went to her parents, and her parents said, "My goodness, she's not black." But she said she was identifying as that. And I thought, and that was so fascinating to me that it didn't matter to the rest of us. We saw the absurdity of her claim based on that she just simply wasn't.
Right.
And now, I don't know what my point is in doing that is that, but my point is that we all saw some absurdity in what she was trying to do, and I think that there is a little bit. That's why I said the culture is kind, but please, that from an outsider perspective, I'm sitting there thinking, I love my trans friends, but please make it easy on me to remember what you want to be called. It's like,
Right.
and
Because
I know
you don't need,
I mean,
let's
I
try
know
not to
people,
complicate it.
yeah, I know some people that are like, I mean, I don't know hardly anybody else outside of me. I mean, I think we're all pretty stealthy. If you want to know the numbers are about 18, there are about 18.3 million adults that
Yeah.
have gender transitioned and claim a gender identity that's different than their biology.
Yeah.
And which means if you want to know what that number looks like, it's the same number of the number in my state of Oklahoma. It's the same number of people that go to a Thunder game for the playoffs, and
Yeah.
so that's a hell
Which
of
is
a lot of people.
it's a lot. And
It's
and
a
the thing
lot.
is, it's like when I look at this, it's like, and my point of comparing it to when I was bringing up racism, it's like it's the approach to which we handle it.
Yeah.
Because, there have been times where my husband and I have, faced discrimination, not as much as others, so we can't compare to that. But it's the way that my husband and I, have approached it. There have been times where sometimes with his upbringing or sometimes of his perception, something might occur that seemed discriminative, and he would look at me and say, "Oh my gosh," and he wanted to jump on it. I was like, "No, honey, you were just acting like an asshole. Like, I mean, that, like, you were acting like a dick. They treated you like you were acting like a dick. This wasn't a color situation. Like,
I
my
love that.
opinion, it wasn't a color issue." But then, there have been times where he's like calling it like he sees it, and I'm like, "Oh no, you go to town by all means."
Yeah,
Like,
I was just going to interject and say I've had similar circumstances. It's pretty funny is that, you know, uh, of course of course I want my appearance to be validated and validating.
mhm,
And, I've had people come in when I was running the stores, the fashion boutiques, pretty high fashion, chic fashion. And I'd have ladies come in and be short or be in an attitude, and I'd turn around and look at one of my staff members, and I'd say, "Oh my gosh, is it me? Do I look wrong? I mean, how do my lips look?" And they're like, "Oh no, she's just a bitch."
yeah.
And
Well,
I'd be
and
like,
that's what
"Ooh,
it
I
really
thought it
comes
was
down
me."
to. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, and that's what it really comes down to is in a lot of this, we have to pay attention to what's going on. We have to pay attention to one, what we're aligning with, where are we at in our phase of life? Where is that taking us? Some of the times it's like, other individuals may not understand, what you might be going through because of their belief system or belief system of not, like their religion does not allow them to even have space for that kind of understanding. But then it's like, but it's not their job to do something about it. It's more of, you know what, go ahead, pray about it, send blessings to the person in their life discovery, and that's the end of it. Like that's
Yeah,
really where it should end.
yeah,
Because there's so many different things that are in play right now, and a lot of it is those control tactics and manipulation to get people all heated up and to the point where they're combating against each other. And really, it's like we need to learn how to coexist in society, especially when it comes to all the things that we're facing right now. Like our society is becoming so divisive. Like there's such a big division that's occurring that needs to stop. We need to stop battling each other. We need to stop hating on one another. Life is hard enough as it is. We need to have more compassion. And honestly, it's easy to hold space for someone and say, "You know what? I love you. I don't really understand what's going on, but you know what? I'm going to honor the space in your process of life. And then, if this means that we get to continue to be friends and communicate, yay. And if it's not, then so be it. But it's about honoring what's right for the individual, and and not seeking judgment and opinions and holding them using those against them in their self-discovery. Because that's part of what that actually creates more complications and more division in their process, and also in the person understanding their process.
Yeah, I'm going from my perspective. My perspective is that most of the divisiveness is generated on the edges, and that in the middle, I'm not as disturbed. I maybe not as disturbed as what you just said. I just don't. I see that the culture is advancing, and that the so much of the divisiveness is generated at the edges, the right and the left. I've talked a lot about the compelled validation that I see sometimes fostered from the left, but a lot of times it comes from a good place, and that they're speaking for people that they don't think are speaking up. It's just that they don't speak for me.
And it's their approach. It's the assumption that they know to speak for everyone, and then the approach to which they take it. And that's how it is across the bar. It doesn't matter what political side you're on.
Let me go to the right now. So to the right, I feel very comfortable because I lived most of my adult life, and even as I was always involved in politics, and had an interest in it from the time I was in my teens. I had, and the thing about this is why I feel somewhat well-rounded, not only in my acceptance of all kinds of things in the culture now, and opinionated. I do have my own opinion, so it makes me opinionated. Doesn't mean it's extreme. But I grew up in a house of a mother that was a social worker and tended to have some liberal outlook. And I grew up with a father that was a Navy man, and so might have a conservative outlook. So I grew up with a nice little balance, and I got to see each side, and I got to see arguments presented from each side. But what I saw was not arguments. I just saw discussion, and I saw a lot of friends of my family from all over, and politics was just not discussed in the house. And I think that, and we do that in my home. We have lots of people in our home every month. We celebrate our favorite people once a month of all different walks of life. Our favorite people are brought into our home to celebrate their friendship with us. The right tends to, at the extreme edges, have good-heartedness, that they know they feel that they know what's best, God wants best for the culture and the world and humanity, themselves and me. And so it comes from a good place, but they don't know. They can't tend to get the log out of their own eye to see that, to judge me. And if they would just follow what Jesus said.
Well, it wasn't their job in the first place. Like,
so
that's a God thing, not a them thing.
Just don't judge me. I'm comfortable. I didn't talk to God about my transition because I didn't want to be told no. And I believe Jesus is exactly who he said he was. And I feel very comfortable how he and I would get along. And I'm sure that he would really vex me with a lot of questions. And I'm sure it would make me feel very seen and loved in the same conversation. I didn't want to be told no. But if you think if we're all made in God's self-image, then he's got to have a good sense of humor. So I figured he'd probably, if I would have talked to him about it, he would have probably said, "Well, Andrea, I've got some great plans for you, girl."
Yeah.
And so, anyway,
and honestly, living your authentic self and getting in alignment with what your soul is compelling you to do is part of finding that discovery of your purpose and what you were born here to do. So it's not saying that, you say that you didn't really bring up the conversation because you didn't want to hear no. Well, when you said that, I was like, well, that goes back to me of, the opinions of right and wrong. But the fact is that that's a different time, not right now in the physical world. Like those conversations, you have to keep going upon your path, figuring out where your next steps are, getting yourself to where you need to be. And, that's how everyone needs to do, is reflect inward, focus on what your mission is in life, staying focused on not dabbling into control tactics upon other people and how they're going about doing their stuff. Like, stay focused on you and your relationship to God's source and getting to where your mission is.
So let me go. When I say the right, a lot of people identify as the right. You've got the right and the left. And when I say the right tends to think of what God wants for me, and that they know best, or they know best what God thinks of me. I'm talking about some fringes. I am not talking about the middle 80% of our culture. I am talking about the fringes that love to, and that are the fringes that are politically driven. I want to be extremely clear. And that's going to lead me to talk about this. When I transitioned at Pfizer, we set precedent in the way it was done. And what I did was, there was several things I did, but I went to my team individually. And I was one of 7 white guys on my team in conservative state of Oklahoma that were point people for Pfizer. They genuinely accepted what I told them and what my plans were, and they graciously accepted that info and were very it was just great. It was a great how it went over. The responses, I had one response of help me understand, and I went right back to, I cannot help you understand. I barely understand myself. The other ones were just, hey, you're still the same in the inside, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, I am. And they're like, well, it's fine with me. Just keep selling. And that was a genuine thought process. And they hadn't even gone through diversity training. Can you believe it?
Yeah, that's
but you know what?
amazing.
They did. They did, and they were happy to have done it. But I felt somewhat complicit after I didn't know for a long time that they went through a diversity training around going to be working with me, and I felt somewhat complicit in that. Oh my gosh, did I put them through that? But also at the same time, I didn't like the fact that I didn't know what they were told in regards to how to treat me, and I still don't. And so I thought that was interesting. Little self-feedback isn't that interesting that someone else or some other entity was telling my team, my co-members, the best way to treat me, not me telling them the best way to treat me, that someone else, once again, someone else knew better on how to treat me than I did. And I find that a little fascinating as well. So a little sidebar there, but
I love that.
yeah, it's really interesting. Here's something else that this may lead to. The diversity, you and I are in Oklahoma and Texas, or Texas and Oklahoma. I'm in Oklahoma, you're in Texas. And DE&I has been a point of contention here in these 2 states. I see, since I tend to look at the positive out of a lot of things, I see this as, once again, maybe the opportunity to talk about diversity and inclusion actually takes a step forward. Now that it is not mandated. You know how you always tell people all the time, if you want someone to do something, you make a law against it. And I look at this as not quite the same, but it's like we might actually have some interesting conversation now that someone's not compelled to have it. And so that's always I've seen that as an opportunity, because I've been a leader of teams that have been extremely diverse, and I've just had some really neat have some really neat things that's brought to the table, brought to me as a leader, having those things. And so I don't look at it as I look at as a really cool topic to talk about, and what I had.
Well, and you are very, the way you present things is you're open to having the conversations, but you're also very firm to not push your self or an agenda or have any kind of thing onto other people. You're very mindfully respectful of other people, their processes, and their belief systems. And
Well,
that's what I think is not being shared enough of, is that, like you said at the very beginning, you yourself can't answer all the questions. You can only deal with what you've been going through, what you know of now, and where you see yourself going forward. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because it's that open and honesty, and it opens that conversation.
well, I own my stuff. And
Yes, you
so
do.
the thing is, I own my stuff. I know who I am. I know, um, and I think that that's why I'm on stages now.
Yeah.
Is that I own my stuff. I give people. I'm very unique in my experience. You can find a lot of people that worked in pharma. You can find a lot of people in fashion. You can find a lot of ranchers, and you can find a lot of gun carriers, and you can find a lot of triathletes. But you don't find a whole lot of that have done both, and a whole bunch of that stuff's been done as a man and a woman. It gives me a very unique perspective on life, and I'm very much of an individual. And
Yeah. And
so I've learned,
your approach is what gets you on those stages, is
yeah,
because
and I
you're
and I love
doing
the
it that
I just
mindfully,
like
respectfully.
well, I appreciate you saying that. It's nice to hear, and it's a nice thing to say. And I just think I really just like the discussion, and people need a little bit different perspective so that they're not railroaded into thinking that things are an either or. There's a whole lot of gray,
Yeah.
and I was raised that way, and I'm gonna live that way, and
I love that.
I can't be railroaded. That's the
Yeah.
thing, is I'm not 20 something, and you can't railroad me. Um, so I'm here's another. You want to go, but you want to talk about some masculine and feminine, and when I talk about that you can't railroad me, I was very comfortable in my masculinity. And so I knew I wasn't I wasn't a uh, girly man. I was very comfortable in who I was, and as a man, as a son, as a husband, as a father, I knew exactly who I was. I also knew who I was as myself, that it was authentic for me to ride Harleys and shoot M16s and things like that. It was because I was so comfortable in my masculinity that I could let it go, and because it and do and experience the rest of my life the way I wanted to experience it. And now I'm comfortable in my feminine aspects. So I think that the culture with the argument over the roles that we have now and all that kind of stuff, I still think that they're great. I still think that they're great discussions to have and things like that. I just don't like to get all twisted up in them and stuff like that, or fit into a certain category, because I've always been
Right.
comfortable with exactly who I was.
That's good. Well,
Yeah.
Andrea, how do people reach out and find you if they're wanting to? Because I know that you help with style, you help with coaching, you help with a lot of different things. I believe it is, where is your website, and how can they find you on Instagram?
It's AndreaLeigh.com on my website, and they can look at my contact information is on there. And I am at The Real Andrea Leigh on Instagram, and I am at Andrea Leigh on Facebook. And if they're interested in me, in visiting with me further, whether it's on an individual coaching basis, and I do that, I've got several clients, we can do that. I'd be happy to entertain that, and we can have a get acquainted call. And if they would just like me to speak to their group or organization, I think they'd be fascinated on my takes on where we are in the gender and
Hmm.
gender identity and cultural discussion, or if sometimes it's in the discussion revolving around diversity and inclusion in the workplace and the processes of transition. I do that as well. So
That's
that's at
beautiful. Refreshing.
AndreaLeigh.com.
refreshing and thank you so much for being so open and honest and just showing up as your authentic self. And we so appreciate you taking the time to be with us on the Kapitol Life today.
Yeah, I love being here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me today on the Kapitol Life, where we talk about all the things. Join me next Saturday as we talk under pressure. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and Facebook at Kapitol Health. That's Kapitol Health. Please share with your friends and family. The Kapitol Life is available on all podcasting platforms except Pandora. Our goal at the Kapitol Life is to provide a safe place to get information when it comes to your health and wellness, especially when dealing with all of life's phases. Remember to take care of yourself, because you're somebody's everything.